is as the Bible describes it. Now, the Bible describes Jesus in so many different ways. He's the Messiah throughout the whole gospel. He's a teacher, he's a leader, he's a rabbi, he's a healer. Hebrews 7:24 through chapter 8. We won't read the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of skip around now. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. So we used to have a priesthood, and the priests, they would have to come to God for people. It wasn't necessarily this personal relationship. It was, but culturally it was seen as, I have sin in my life, so I'm going to go confess it to the priest. The priest is going to go then and deal with his own sin to God, and then he's going to bring our sin to God and get it. That's how we were cleansed of our sin, among other things like sacrifices as well. But Jesus, there was two things wrong with those priests. One, they had to atone for their own sin prior to ours. Number two is they died. And they were succumbed to death just like we are. And so they didn't have mastery over death like Christ does. Christ is that eternal priesthood, that eternal high priest, the one that we need. It actually says that such a high priest truly meets our needs. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, so that's kind of important. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens, unlike the other priests. It kind of seals that new covenant with Christ. He is our high priest. So we can see him in that light as a high priest. Now, Ezekiel goes kind of a step further, and it's not necessarily looking at Jesus, but it is, because Jesus and God, same person. But Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 4, and continuing through at least verse 28, but we'll read 4 for now. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal. Now verse 25 through 28, because Ezekiel goes on about the cherubim and how beautiful and glorious they were. But 25 through 28 says, Then there came a voice from above the vault, over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli. Don't know what that is, but I'm sure it's magnificent. And high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire. And brilliant light surrounded him, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day. So was the radiance around him. So Ezekiel goes into this poetic description of the Lord on his throne. I think that's where we get our reverence and our awe, when we hear descriptions of God like that. Now Isaiah kind of flip-flops when he's telling us the story of the coming Messiah. And I don't know if this really affects our perception, per se, of Christ, because, all the movies we have, Christ is 6'1" with long, flowy locks of hair, and he's beautiful, right? But in Isaiah, he says that the Messiah to come, says he grew up before him like a tender shoot. Kind of means he's scrawny, I think. And like a root out of dry ground, he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. He was not good looking. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Jesus was not the Hollywood Jesus. Jesus was Jewish. There's not too many 6'1" Jewish people out there. There just isn't. Is that because the battery's dying? No? Corey bumped something, maybe. Moving on. So, Jesus is a high priest who we revere. But we can also see him as this magnificent, glorious being. And if we listen to Isaiah, there's nothing attractive about him physically. Now, I remember, this is probably 10 or 12 years ago, this t-shirt came out. It said, "Jesus is my homeboy." And I remember a lot of older people going, "That is so irreverent. Can't believe they would make a t-shirt like that. How could they do it?" Well, homeboy in culture just means friend. And so in John 15:12 through 17, Jesus really proclaims that I am your friend. I don't no longer see you as a servant, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. And I've told you everything that the Father has told me. That's what Jesus tells his disciples. You're my friends. Jesus says you're my homeboys. Whether we like that terminology or not, it speaks to the culture. It speaks to the kids. It speaks to the teenagers. Jesus is my homeboy. But let's focus on who Jesus is to me or you. See, if we ask who is Jesus and we put the question mark there, we can be wrong in that answer. We can have differing opinions. But when we ask the question, who is Jesus to you, there is no wrong answer. It's your personal relationship. I asked this question at the youth group the other day, and I said, please don't be afraid to get the answer wrong, because there's no wrong answer, and something awesome happened. And you might not think it's awesome, but a girl said, he's nothing to me. I don't know who he is. Whoa, that's an opportunity. Well, this is who he is. And it was her first time at the youth group, so why would I expect her to know Jesus already, right? But it was an opportunity to share who Jesus is. And it was an opportunity for everyone else to share who Jesus is to them in front of her, and maybe intrigue her insight, her desire to follow him. When we ask, who is Jesus to you? If you have a pen and a paper, or you have an iPhone, I want you to text that real quick. Or not text it, but don't text in church, right? Write it down. Type it out on your phone. Who is Jesus to you? I want you to really think about that. Who is Jesus to you? We're going to play a little game at Wayne's expense, but and he doesn't know that, but it'll be all right. Trust me. Wayne is an attorney. And he's a very good attorney. And part of his job is fact collecting. And so he collects all the facts because he wants to defend his clients the best. And so there's a person just like Wayne, maybe his prodigy or something, but nothing like him. But as far as work ethic, they work for the government, and they are the fact collectors. Now, I know that's kind of surprising with our government. They're collecting flat facts. Most of the time, our government doesn't care about facts, right? But this is fast-forwarded 100 years. And maybe you think that 100 years from now, this is kind of not even going to happen, or maybe you think it's 30 years from now. But Christianity is illegal. We're in 2116. Christianity is illegal. We're not in a church building. We're in a basement, kind of like China. And the only thing the government has is what you just wrote down, if you wrote it down. Maybe you hypothetically wrote it down. So we'll just play that game. The proclamation that you just made, who Jesus is to you, is the only thing the government has on you. An attorney like Wayne is hired by the government to pull up all the evidence on you and convict you as a Christian. To convict you of the proclamation that you just made. Is there enough evidence? Saturday. Actually, let's go Monday through Saturday. Because on Sunday, we come to church and we're here and we do God stuff. But what happens on Monday through Saturday? Is there enough evidence to convict you of what you just proclaimed on that paper? I would hope that every single one of us would have plenty of evidence in our lives, in our daily walk, that we would be able to say, I'm convicted, praise God, I'm a martyr for Christ because the government is going to now kill me or put me in prison because of what I proclaimed on this piece of paper or on my phone. See, who Jesus is to us is extremely important. In America, it's very difficult to realize the sacrifice it is to follow Christ. See, in over 51 countries in this world, it's already illegal to be a Christian, to be a follower of Christ. And they do things from put you in jail, kill you, hang you, cut off your head. They do things like just push you out of their community. In the Middle East, there are several communities of all Christians because they were forced out of their community. The moment they got baptized in water in public, they lost their family, they lost their job, they lost their everything, and they did it anyways. I think last week somebody mentioned something like, do we even have a concept of how much of a sacrifice it is to follow Christ? Who is Jesus to you, is the question. Now maybe that's a hard question to answer. Maybe you're on the fence with Jesus, maybe you're just going through motions. It's still an important answer in your life. It tells you where you're at with God. It tells you where, because we always know where we are with Christ, right? If we have read the Bible just a little bit, we know that He died for us, that He adopted us into His family, that He loves us, and that He desires for us to love Him. But if you don't know who Jesus is to you, if maybe there's no evidence in your life to prove the proclamation that you made, hypothetically, on the paper or in the phone, if there's not enough evidence to say, I am a follower of Christ outside of Sunday morning, maybe this is the reason. We lost the realization of the need for Christ. Because in America, we have everything pretty easy. We're a first world country. We all have cars, and that's better than 98% of the rest of the world. 2% of the world owns a vehicle, one vehicle. 98% of the world does not own a vehicle. And so, therefore, we are very blessed. Sometimes it's hard to see that need for Christ. And my hopes today is that we would not look at our life and say, wow, I don't have that much evidence for Christ. What my hope is that we would say, man, I need Jesus. And this is how I need Jesus on a daily basis. This is how I need Christ. Like, I cannot live without Him. He is my breath. Last Sunday, during the Bible study, we talked about staying in love, and we're going to do the second segment of that today. But Andy Stanley talked about love as being a noun at first and becoming a verb. And I love that Jesus correlates His relationship with the church and a husband and wife's relationship in Ephesians 5. He correlates the two because I think there's so much in common between the two, in the sense that when you see a teenager or a young adult or even an old adult, especially an old adult, when it clicks in their head and in their heart and they really just figured it out, who Jesus really is. It clicks and they're like, oh, He did that for me. And they begin to fall in love with Jesus. And you see them in the front row at church just eating up the sermon. Even when you're in the back row going, man, I'm getting hungry. The person that is in love with Christ is just eating up that sermon. Man, I wish the preacher wouldn't be so long-winded today. This kid is like, give me more. Or the older person is like, I need this. This is food. I actually stopped eating lunch for a while and started reading for half an hour, my Bible. You know, I never got hungry. Did it for like 6 weeks, 2 months. It's true, He is the bread of life. It's kind of weird. That was kind of off topic, but it came to my head, so there you go. Realizing our need for Christ. New believers, they have this love as a noun. They're just so in love with it. They just desire it. It's all about that new, fresh relationship. And then we start making commitments to God, and the devil starts attacking us because he doesn't like what's going on. And then that freshness and that in-love feeling just kind of fades a little bit. And in Christian counseling, this happens all the time. When a married couple comes to you, they say, I'm just not in love anymore. I just don't love that person. When they say, I just don't love that person, well, that's right, because love is an action, and you haven't loved them actively for a really long time. So why would you have a feeling of love if you're not actively doing anything about it? And so when we first accept Christ and we're in love with Him, when we're so fired up for God, and then that starts to fade, we start asking, why God, why is this fading? And really it's because we're not actively loving Him to stay in love. We're not turning that love from a noun into a verb, into an action, and into mobility and activities. And that correlates with our marriages, with our relationships. If I have a best friend and I never ever call him, are we really best friends? No, our friendship fades into nothingness. If I have, which I do, so it's not an if, but if I don't talk to my wife, does our relationship grow? So when we don't talk to God, does our relationship grow? So when we don't do active love things, love actions towards Christ, but we expect that in-love feeling all the time, who needs to do more? Jesus already died and spilt every ounce of His blood for us, right? So I think who Jesus is to us really is defined by how much we need Him, or the reality in our own minds and our own hearts of the need for Christ. On a daily basis, when you wake up in the morning, do you ask yourself, what is my need for God? What do I need Him for today? Usually I need Him to do everything for me. Especially the emotional stuff, especially the verbal stuff. When somebody comes to me and with irritation, or when something irritating happens, I need God to intervene and say, hey, don't go rip that person's head off and make that receptionist cry. And this almost happened this week, and it was just a blessing from God. We got a bill that we shouldn't have gotten. And I was going to go down there, and I was going to basically tell this receptionist what for, and that I wasn't going to pay this bill because I have insurance, and it's good insurance, and I don't want to do this, and this isn't going to happen. And a friend of mine kind of just whispered, why don't you just do this instead? And it was straight from God. And I did that, and then I called my insurance agent, and my people called their people, and I didn't have to deal with it. It was so much better. And now we're realizing that we have people, and God has blessed us with people. And so don't really know who those people are, but it worked out pretty good, where I didn't have to wring somebody's neck or make somebody feel small and be very unchristian-like. Never to really witness to that person again, because I was that guy, you know. But things get in our life, things interrupt us, and they make us realize our need for God if we stop and take a breath. Our anger, our frustrations, they just, if we stop for a moment and we say, God, this is why I need you, so I don't act like a fool. In Ephesians 5, Let me get there. As the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. But husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. I love how Jesus correlates marriage relationship and the give and take of marriage relationship to his relationship with the church. And he always kind of tells us to step it up a little bit. Like, the way I love the church, that's how you're supposed to love people. Your spouse, your everything. If we actively do this, we actively understand our need for Christ. Isn't that what we just did by doing communion, taking communion? We reminded ourselves of what he did for us on a cross. And we took part of something that just helps us continue to fall in love with him. Reminding ourselves of the good things in our relationships strengthens our love. It's when we start to focus on the negative parts. That's when we're focusing on the negative of our life. We're magnifying the negative instead of the positive. We're magnifying everything that's going wrong instead of how much we really need Jesus to make it all right. So who is Jesus to you? Is he nobody? Is he somebody? Do you have a need for Christ right now? Do you have a need for Jesus today? Tomorrow? Reveal that need in your own heart. Reveal that need to yourself every day to rekindle that love that you have for Christ. See, Christ's love for us doesn't need rekindling. It's always there. He did it all on the cross. When he said it is finished, he meant it. That's how much he loves us. It's set in stone. We are his children. An interesting thing, a concept is that if God is the king of the universe and we're his children, then we are royalty. Each and every one of us, God made us that when we accepted him. If you need to respond today, maybe you can't find that need for Christ. Maybe you don't know who he is. Maybe he's nobody to you yet. Now is the time to come forward. You can get prayer. Now is the time to realize that the Bible says that now is the time of salvation. Today. Today you can come and need Christ. Realize that need and embrace that need and say, I'm not alone. I want Jesus. I want more of him. I want to know who Jesus is to me. And I want him to be more to me than he is right now. As we stand and sing, now's your time to come forward.